you're in Haifa right now. Give us just a sense of, like, before we get into the broader and deeper questions here, but what give us a sense of what the mood is as far as you can tell. I don't know how long you've been in Haifa.
Yes, probably long enough to answer your question, at least. The mood is complex. It is, first of all, dictated by the media, the mainstream media here. And the main theme there is revenge. Revenge and readiness for an attack, a brutal attack with very little, if at all, any compassion for what might happen in Gaza as a result. So I would say the ultimate motivation seems to be at this moment revenge. But when you leave the media and you kind of go into the civil society and its outlets, you can see, first of all, a shock, a trauma. I mean, they haven't yet, Israel as a Jewish society has not recovered from the trauma of the morning of the 7th of October, a sense of an army that cannot defend its citizens, a government that cannot take care of its citizens after the attack, and apprehension of what might come as a result of an Israeli attack on Gaza. So I would say that this is the kind of two basic emotions that seem to drive the discourse, the conversation in Israel. And on top of all of it is the whole question of those who were taken to Gaza, more than 222 people, including children and old people. And there begins to be, you can see the beginning of a debate of whether this is a crucial factor that should dictate the next steps, or should the army and the politician, regardless of this, continue with their revengeful, retaliatory operation of grand land invasion and reoccupation of the Gaza Strip.
And how does that relate to Netanyahu in public sentiment and his government?
Yeah, that's a very good question. He definitely has lost his main aura. His main aura was Mr. Security. It's very difficult for him to appear now as Mr. Security, that's for sure. He's trying to regaining it with the way he dons his new clothing as a general in the armed field. He doesn't take, he gives interviews to foreign outlets, but he doesn't give interviews to the Israeli media. He only gives statements, a lot of war rhetoric, a lot of demonization of the Palestinians. But the sense is that he's also losing support in his base, among his base. First of all, because some of them were also victims of the attack of Saturday. And secondly, the disaster or the fiasco is so huge that he cannot kind of overcome it with usually what he usually succeeds in doing with words and accusing other people or other organization for the failure.
I mean, my sense is that, or I would guess that the state of shock, the trauma, has inhibited the Israeli population to think beyond, that question of revenge, and maybe beyond that question of Netanyahu's failure. But is there any, and it's obviously, as we're at least, at arm's length and a step removed from this, it's easier for us to contemplate these questions of how much of of the ideas of that there was authoritarianism coming home in the form of the judicial reform. And then the question of the larger context of in which this, this latest round of intense violence sits. How much of that is being, contemplated? I would assume not that much, although that's where I think we want to go now.
First of all, yes, definitely. We would have hoped that out of that tragedy, something more constructive would come out. But I would say that you noted two different things. One is whether people would relate the surprise, the fiasco, call it what you want, and of course the huge human tragedy, to the way the Netanyahu government operated before the 7th of October, to its ideology, to its intent to ruin what many Israelis saw as ruining the state system and infrastructure. And definitely that conversation is, you can already hear it. It's beginning. It's beginning. What you are talking about is, and what you and I suppose, and hope, I'm sure Emma as well, are hoping for, is that some Israelis would say, wait a minute, we should have learned the lesson of the limitation of power. We should have learned the lesson of what happens if you keep people under a brutal and inhuman siege for 15 years. And we should learn a lesson that a war machine, as mighty as it might be, does not help us to solve the main issue that makes life of everyone who lives between the river and the sea quite miserable. That kind of conversation has not yet developed. I'm an optimistic person, but I think it will take time. I do believe that it will eventually raise questions about the invincibility of the Israeli army, the utility of using all the time force and oppression as means of, dealing or managing the life with the Palestinians in this piece of land. But I don't think it's going to happen very soon, unfortunately. But one has to hope
Right.
that such a huge human tragedy on both sides would waken up at least large sections of the society to understand that there must be an alternative. As we started the conversation, the mood in Israel definitely now is not open for such a soul-searching or such a reckoning.
I imagine that one of the sort of, to the extent that if and when we get to that place, part of it goes through the idea that strictly on a utilitarian perspective, if you will, there's only so many military personnel. And if you're going to send them from the border, from Gaza to the West Bank to protect settlers as they're, building a sukkah, or as they're, trying to take Palestinian homes, you start to realize, like, the math at one point is not going to work. Like, that is a microcosm of a problem that it's almost a peer into the future on some level.
I think it's even more profound than that. If you think about the last big operation of Israel in Jenin, in the Jenin refugee camp, if you need 1,000 soldiers and 100 armored vehicles in order to capture 5 Palestinian guerrillas with very primitive weapon, it means that your army is not able actually to defend a proper guerrilla warfare, or is not capable of dealing with it properly. I think some Israelis back in their mind have a nightmare scenario that they are very happy did not unfold. And that would have been a coordinated surprise attack by Hezbollah and Hamas at the same moment. Because the same thin layer of defense that allowed the Hamas a relative easy entry into the areas around Gaza, the same thin layer also was there in the north. Of course, now it's been emboldened by Israeli army, but it was not there on the 7th of October. And one wonders how Israel would have come out from a twin attack, a coordinated attack, and so on. So yes, I think this is not just a matter of, that there's not enough soldiers, or you have to get your priorities right. It is the whole idea that you are not involved in one event. You are involved in a structure. You are involved in a structure of colonization, oppression, ethnic cleansing that began in 1948. And you are not going to get out of it but one big bang. Neither would the Palestinians be able to liberate themselves with one successful military operation, but it's only going to escalate. And one cycle after a cycle of bloodshed would unfortunately unfold. And there are alternatives. But the people who talk about the alternatives are not the ones people want to hear right now.